Okay, this is the first official once a month free workshop that I'm offering. Today is Sensational Sleep. We are focusing today on how to use the sensory system in order to understand sleep a little bit better and in order to support sleep. I can't answer that right now. I'm in the middle of the workshop. I'm sorry. You need to go. We did the best we could to set you up. We've got 3 kids at home right now. I do my best to set up the day, but I figured it was a high chance. I haven't run a workshop at 2:30 in the afternoon before. I'm gonna have to figure that out as we go along. But long and short is that this is the first of monthly series that's going to go at least until May and probably until June. Guys, my Kindle was upstairs, but I can't tell you where it is, and I need you to leave. You had all day to sort this out. Okay, thanks, guys. Okay, so where was I? That's 2 false starts within 5 minutes, but we'll see if we can get past that. This month is all about sensory. Next month, the topic hasn't been decided yet, so who knows? At the end of the hour, I'm going to, especially for those 0 to 6 months, hang into the end or come back to watch the replay because I am putting in a special bonus for you. So make sure you at least get the replay on that to find out if you are interested in the bonus. I'm going to try to do a topic that is highly important to everybody, but it may focus on different ages every month. In terms of housekeeping, I am a regulated healthcare professional in Ontario. This is not therapy. This is not tailored individual consult. This is general education. So if you're looking for more support, you can reach out and I can either steer you in the right direction or provide support myself, but this is very general information. So I want to start with a little story. The story is that we recently got a fish. Now I'm mom to 3 boys. They're all school age. Hitting the preteen end of the age range of early childhood at this point. And we got this family fish that my eldest is taking care of. And his name is Finn. And what I've noticed about Finn, we all noticed pretty early on, is at first we were really afraid that Finn was getting sucked up right against the filter that filters the water in the tank. And we thought he was going to get swallowed up by this thing. But even when the filter was off, he managed to peel himself away from the entry to this filter. And it dawned on us that Finn is actually liking the feeling of that filtered water, that draw of water pulling him into the side of the filter entrance. And when we talk about sensory, this is a fish that obviously likes the sensation of being sucked up against a wall. And when he's had enough, he swims away. And I figure this is a prime example of understanding that we are very sensory-based animals. We seek out sensory information. We seek out senses that feel good, and we seek out senses in order to tell us about the world around us. So when we talk about sensory, we're really talking about how to get information in and how to seek out the information that we're looking through our senses, how to process that in our brain and central nervous system, and then how to respond to that, how to act on that. Whether it's responding with screaming because we touch something very hot, or whether we respond by feeling relaxed because a massage feels good. Everything that we're learning about our world is through our senses. We know that very well because when we don't have those sensations, we can't learn about our world and we know less about what's going on. We know less about where our bodies are in space and how to move about in that space. And we're far less safe because our senses certainly keep us safe. We move away from things that feel like they're hurting us, whether it's sound, whether it's touch, whether it's heat or temperature, and we move towards things that feel good or that help us relax. And so at the very basis of sensory processing and at the very basis of understanding how senses help us sleep, we need to know that at the very foundation, it's safety and understanding the world around us. So what I want to first go through, so that's why the senses are important. I want to go through, and you can pop it into the chat or come off chat if you want. Probably with this size group, it's the chat would be best. Name the senses that you're aware of, the ways that we take in information about the world around us. Some of them will be really easy to think of. If you don't think of any, there's a few that I'm not expecting you to think of today. I'll pop them in, I'll add them after. But when you think of senses, what senses come to mind for you? Okay. When it comes, I'll fill in. So sight, thanks Sandia, sight. So we see, we smell, we touch especially through our fingertips, but we get touch everywhere. So that's sight, smell, touch, tasting. We like certain foods over others because of the taste. That's a sense. What else didn't we do? So hearing, vision, taste, smell, touch. The three that tend not to come up, because those are the main ones we think of, right? The five. This one that often gets forgotten is proprioception. So where our bodies are in space. We know when our arm is above our shoulder versus below. We know when our arm is extended versus bent. We know even with shoes on, whether we're standing on cement or on grass. And that's all proprioception. And that's through our joints and our muscles and tendons, feeding information back. In fact, it is so good at feeding information back to us that it doesn't even need to send a signal to the brain to let us know that we're stepping off the edge of a stair, for example, and we can correct our balance. But another one that kids love, and if you have any kiddo who is moving, you will know this sense well once I point it out, and it's vestibular or balance. And that's coming from the inner ear. We have very special bones that have fluid in all directions that tell us whether our head is upright or tilted, tells us whether we're turning or spinning or whether we're stationary. And any kiddo or any mom with toddlers that's on this call will know that kids love to spin. They love to get dizzy. They love to really push that sense to the max, or most kids. There are some kids who absolutely do not like that kind of motion or input. But it's a very important sense for being able to stay upright and walk. And without it, we're not able to do that. And the last sense, the one that is really forgotten, is enteroception. And all the ones up until enteroception are all external senses. We are taking information from our environment and learning about what's going on around us and then deciding how we're going to act on that. Whereas enteroception is internal. So it's the sense that tells us to peel off our sweater when we're hot, to lie down if we're lightheaded, to close our eyes if we're tired, to eat if we're hungry, to visit the washroom if we have to eliminate pee or poo. What other senses are entero? That spidey sense that gives you the sense that you're not in a safe space or that something needs your attention really fast. That other sense that sometimes alerts us if we're really in tune with our instincts. And enteroception doesn't get a lot of play, and yet it is so important. If we didn't feel the sensation of hunger, we wouldn't eat. Or if we didn't feel the sensation of fullness, we wouldn't stop eating. And we all know that there are conditions that do interfere with the sensory processing of any of these senses, including enteroception, and that can impact us. Now, all of you have babies or toddlers, probably somewhere between birth and 3 years. So this example that I have that really draws in just how much your baby is learning about the world around you through the senses is a really nice one. You can imagine your baby, if they're on solids or if they're breastfeeding or bottle feeding. My example is solid foods, but it'll apply to anything. When a baby is sitting in their high chair and they pick up some food and they feel the food in their hand, and then they bring it to their mouth, and as they're bringing it to their mouth, they can smell it. And when they put it to their lips, they can feel the texture of the food. They can tell whether it's hard or soft. They can tell the temperature of it. They put it in their mouth and they start moving their tongue around, moving their jaw, moving their cheeks. They can taste the food as they chew it. They can feel it between their gums. And then they their memory is triggered. All this information is coming into their brain. They're processing it. They're thinking, do I like this? Do I remember this? Is this a taste that I've had before or a texture that I recognize? Do I like it? And then what am I going to do about it? Am I going to spit it out? Am I going to take some more? Am I going to look to mom to get me some more or to help me get more? And that is for me, such a wonderful example of just how many senses come into a baby's world to be able to make sense of something as simple as one piece of food. So you can imagine the whole rest of that day, the number of senses that are bombarding their system in wonderful and overwhelming ways that can lead to a much better understanding of why babies and toddlers behave the way they do as they navigate the world. Now, we know as adults, we all have some sensory preferences, right? Some of us like really creamy sauce, like no lumps in the tomato sauce. Others of us really like flavorful food. So I wonder if you can pop into the chat when you think about the senses that bombard you. Well, let's start with the positive ones, the ones that you really enjoy. What are some things that you really like in terms of your senses? It could be music, it could be certain sounds that give you pleasure, or flavors, or tastes, or movement. Anything that gives you sensation that's pleasant. Heat to fall asleep. So you like cozy and warm, heating blankets. Yeah. Yeah. Temperature is definitely one. And we all have tend to have a preference for temperature and sleep too. Anything else that when you think of sensory or senses coming into you that you particularly like? And I'll turn the question around too and get you to think about some senses that you don't like. I know the quintessential one is nails on a chalkboard. I think postpartum, I'm just going to pop this up, tend to look for peaceful sounds, relaxing, right? As a counter to all the being touched out, you go to sound that's actually relaxing. And the feeling of water. Yes. I didn't used to be a bath person until I became a mom. And my colleague said, Heather, one day you will love baths. And I certainly do now. I like my Epsom salt baths. I try to have one every day. So we all, when we think about the senses we enjoy and don't enjoy, we know that they're unique to us, right? And our babies have the same thing. Our babies have a unique sensory profile or sensory personality that dictates or forms to have certain preferences. Now, when babies are very young and toddlers, that whole sensory processing system is really immature, right? Babies can't balance to walk early on. They develop that ability to walk in part because of the feedback they're getting from the world around them. They are not able to fall asleep on their own. They need rocking, or they need nursing, or they need bouncing. And as that sensory processing becomes more mature, they're able to take in information that soothes themselves and involves less of us. They don't like certain flavors or textures when they're new to them, partly for safety, right? It's an instinct to not try something new when you're very young and to wait until it's been offered 6, 10, or a dozen or more times to be able to acclimate to that new taste. That's all sensory information coming in. So in general, and you may be picturing this as I talk and we explore just how different each of us is from the other in terms of what we like sensory wise and what we don't like. That your baby also has unique profile, and you can pop in the chat if there is something that you notice your baby really, really loves or really, really hates. I'd love to have you pop it in the chat. But while you're doing that, I'll speak to the idea that some babies are sensory seekers, and adults too, although we tend to get better and better as adults in modulating how much is coming in and being able to process and manage through that. But babies can be sensory seekers, so they are looking for more input. These are the kiddos who are always moving, right? Always wiggling, always moving. They may have been wiggling in utero, and now that they're out, they're just moving. When they're toddlers, these are kids that like often to bump into things or run into things, climb things. And then there are the sensory avoiders. Kiddos where the dial for senses is turned up all the way to 11. If you've watched the movie Spinal Tap, it's not 10, it's like 11. And what is coming into their system is so loud and so strong that they try to avoid that kind of input, and that keeps them rather tentative, rather cautious, and sometimes lots of more tantrums or meltdowns because it's pretty intense. I'm just reading the comments here. So loves water as well, loves rocking, great. And it's okay if you miss the comments, feel free to comment to your heart's content or not, depending on what you want. Your little one loves the stroke between the eyebrows when falling asleep. Yeah, yeah. That's lovely. And a toddler who hates mushy food like puree, and loves to be dizzy, falls on his face into the cushions. Love it, love it. These are all sensory experiences that are giving them a sense or understanding of the world around them. And it's amazing how varied it can be and how much it's going to change over the years. It really is a developmental process. It's through practice and exposure, but it's also our individuality and the differences between all of us. Babies do tend to need someone else, like an adult, a caring adult, to be able to modulate that input. So you're the one being able to control for your baby how much sensory input is coming and bombarding them. We know that young infants will turn away when they're feeling overstimulated. Often for very young babies, it's when we've been looking, making eye contact with them, smiling and cooing, and their system is taking all this in, and they turn away when they've had too much. And then there are other babies that are leaning in for more, like they just want to catch your eye. I want to talk now and turn the conversation a little bit more specifically to sleep, and that is to look at how an understanding of these senses really can impact sleep and how we can use it to support sleep as well. I'll just check the time. Okay, we're good. Okay, so at bedtime, we know that there are a variety of conditions that we try to set up for bedtime because we know that it tends to be soothing. We know it tends to calm the nervous system down, and we know that the nervous system needs to feel calm and it needs to feel safe to fall asleep. But what is calm and feels safe for one baby is going to be unique compared to another baby. There are some babies who need a particular routine every night, and if we veer from it, it throws them off because they have a need for predictability. There are other babies who need lots and lots of input, so their way of calming down is to seek more sensory input, feed that nervous system so that it can feel more relaxed. So some of the things that you can consider when you're looking at how do I settle my baby or child through a sensory lens, like if we're looking through that lens of sensory processing, we're looking at noise. So what noises interrupt that process? Loud noises from washing dishes after you've put baby down and you're trying to clean up the kitchen. Or a noise like a white noise machine that is soothing for them, or a heartbeat that helps them feel calm too, whether it's your heartbeat, especially in the early days, or whether it's a lullaby even from a sound machine in the room. Of course, touch is part of it too. Little babies, there's a reason they love to be rocked. That rocking motion or the bouncing motion, when it's not fast and frenetic and when it's very rhythmic and even, can calm that nervous system down, that sensory input that calms the nervous system. Touch, I'm picturing your baby with the stroke between the eyebrows, calming them to sleep. Other babies love deep pressure, so they love a nice deep infant massage after their bath. Although, side note, we're talking about baths because for many of us, we think that, and that's okay. If you have to go, the recording is yours as long as you're on my email list. If you're not on my email list and didn't get a specific email from me this morning, then just be sure to email me. I'm glad you could come. So yeah, touch sometimes is deep pressure. And so we know that swaddle can calm babies down. We know that sleep sacks can sometimes help babies feel calm. Most of us have heard of weighted blankets that can help both adults and children over a certain age and at a certain weight that's safe, can calm the nervous system down through deep pressure. Temperature. Someone mentioned warmth for a nice hot room or nice cuddled up with blankets, or lying out in the sun this weekend can be really soothing for the nervous system as well, within a certain range, right? Some of us like really cool, some of us like warm, and we generally have a very small range of what's going to be comfortable. Stress is also part of the sensory landscape for bedtime. And when babies are coming into bedtime having had a stressful day, even if it was a very exciting and positive day, stress is about change or about unpredictability. And so if you've had a birthday party with family, out on the driveway with social distancing, or something extraordinary and unusual in your day, or your baby is starting daycare, or they have a new babysitter, or they get to see grandma for the first time, then that stress is higher, and sometimes it takes longer to calm that nervous system down for bed. And of course, last, and this is an interoception aspect, not feeling tired. Not feeling, I'll put an emphasis on the word feeling tired. It is a sense, that sense of being tired and wanting to welcome sleep. And of course, it's our job as parents to create conditions and environment that invites sleep. So those are some of the ways that senses play a role at bedtime. But I want to talk about the way that senses during the daytime can impact sleep as well. So we know, I've already mentioned, and you may have already experienced, though not as often this, perhaps others have, that when a baby has had a very exciting day, their systems are revved up and they may have more trouble sleeping. When they've had an under-stimulating day, when it's been dull and boring and you've been stuck inside in the rain, or baby has been, you've had a lot of other things to do simultaneously, or you've been tired and run down and not as playful, and your baby is understimulated that day, they may be restless as well. And that really is the push and pull, right, of getting enough sensory input to welcome sleep and to calm the nervous system down without it being too much. And just as another side note, there is no perfect here. There is rarely a perfect day where we are giving our babies the perfect amount of stimulation, not too much, not too little. And there's something really valuable in not having perfect here, because when our babies, just by virtue of the fact that life can be unpredictable and life can be boring, their systems are learning to accommodate and be resilient to the changes that are happening, including boredom. So don't think for a minute that you need to create this perfect sensory environment for your baby. Understanding that the senses are important is enough to help guide you in giving them generally what they need during the day and through bedtime routine to be able to have a calm approach to sleep. Not enough natural light is another daytime one. It may not fall specifically under one sense. We take in light through our eyes, but we also take in that warmth and those rays through our skin. And that can help strengthen sleep as well, partly through circadian rhythm, so hormones, but partly through just that stimulation that we get from being outdoors and in nature. So I want to open it up again to those that want to add to the chat to think about a time when you had trouble falling asleep. And I want you to think about it in terms of senses to figure out what was it, of any of those things or other things that I haven't mentioned may have been contributing to you having trouble falling asleep. I'll try to think of an example myself too. I know for me, I tend to be a good sleeper. Oh, anytime that I'm cold, that warmth is coming up again. You must be glad the days are warmer now. For me, when I'm worried about something, I have trouble falling asleep, and that worry feeds into the nervous system. When it's too bright outside, yeah, and with the time change, that has really had an impact on bedtime, especially for those babies that are going pretty early. Watching something scary at bedtime, yeah. So again, we're taking in, especially when we're watching a movie or taking in information from a screen, the stress, like, because especially if we're vicarious thinkers or we are very empathetic, we tend to bring in something from the screens as if it's real, and our nervous system responds to that. And that's very rousing for the nervous system and can be hard. And then other people thrive on that. I'm just going to move to the chat because I know I missed one. Being worried about something. Yeah, so that's, ruminating or worrying about something that's going to happen and our systems can't relax, or racing, overthinking, which is so, so common, especially in the first year of motherhood and beyond, right? Even if you don't officially have anxiety or depression, um, hormonal changes and the whole shift towards the new role of motherhood and parenthood can really have an impact on our sensory systems and our ability to fall asleep. So, having considered that, I want you to think now about times that your baby has had trouble falling asleep and thinking about, we try so hard as parents to solve or to understand what our babies are going through. Sometimes we nail it and we know what they need. It might be hunger or a diaper change or rocking. And then other times we just don't figure it out. We keep trying to problem solve and eventually realize that our job is not to solve everything, but to be there for our babies and to provide the soothing that they need and the sensory input they need for their nervous systems to calm down. And the best way to do that for babies is through our proximity. Now, I'll take a little side trip here because if any of you have followed my blogs or the information I share, I'm a big fan of Gordon Neufeld. He's a developmental psychologist out in BC. And he has what he calls the 6 roots of attachment. And they are the stages that a baby will go through in the first 5 years of life, that represent building a strong and secure attachment with mom and dad or whoever else is a key figure in that baby's life. And the very first root of attachment is the senses. When we think of that first year of life, and especially when we consider the 4th trimester or that first 3 months after a baby's been born, where they're simply adjusting to this onslaught of sensory information coming at them. They haven't had to experience any of that, at least not to the extent that they are. Sounds were muffled, they didn't eat, they didn't have to think about pooping, and now they're out in the world and adjusting. Certainly the entire year and beyond is a very, very sensory based experience and growth for a baby. Gordon Neufeld's approach is that the more that we can understand that stage, that first year of life as being very sensory, the more that we can provide what babies need. And that means skin on skin. That means rocking, holding, cuddling, carrying, being close to, so proximity, which also kicks in a lot of other senses other than touch and movement, because then babies can smell us, babies can see us, babies can hear us, all things that they cannot do if we're putting them in a separate room to sleep, for example, which is part of why there are guidelines now to keep baby in the same room as parents for at least the first 6 months. And for the AAP, or the American Academy of Pediatrics, it's 12 months. Canada, I think, is 12 months as well. And the reason for that is that helps a baby regulate. It regulates temperature, it regulates heart rate, breathing, and so many other functions that are so important for keeping a baby safe. So lowering the risk of SIDS, but also keeping a baby very regulated. When we look at the nervous system of a baby, we know that they don't have that prefrontal cortex, that logical thinking that we do. So when we get a little bit overwhelmed, our cortisol goes up, but that also kicks in our prefrontal cortex. So we may panic at first or get alerted and are in fight, flight, or freeze. And as soon as we can figure out what it is we need to do to get out of that situation, it's our prefrontal cortex that kicks in to help us problem solving and take action. With a baby, they don't have that. Their prefrontal cortex is borrowed from you. And so you're holding them and rocking them and nursing them to sleep, patting them, swaying with them, carrying them are all things that help them regulate their nervous system through their senses so that they can stay regulated. We talk a lot, or the term self-settling or self-soothing comes up a lot, and there's a lot of misunderstandings about what that means. I prefer to focus on the idea of co-regulation. So a baby is not capable of regulating themselves. Some can by 6 months, maybe half can. The other half are still developing it, not because they are delayed in any way, but because it takes time for these skills to develop and because they are so individual. So for some babies, they're getting it pretty early, 6 months, the self-settling. Instead, if we look at it through the lens of co-regulation, then you know that it is your proximity and your soothing and your input for them that helps them to regulate their body. And that is actually the essence of being able to develop self-regulation later on. They take their cue from you. And most importantly, they learn what it feels like to feel calm and relaxed. If we made them learn it on their own, they would only know that feeling of alarm and discomfort and not have any way from a brain development perspective or self-regulation perspective, no tools in their toolbox to be able to regulate. I'm going to take one short pause again and just look at the chat that came through. So comforting to hear, especially because I'm watching while my 3-month-old naps on me. Contact napping, yes. If you don't know my perspective on that very well, let me reassure everyone on this call that the idea of developing bad habits by providing the sensory soothing and co-regulation that your baby needs it's a myth. We need to provide that co-regulation for babies. There is a reason babies are so soothed by our proximity, by being in arms and by swaying and rocking. Of course, there are nights where nothing will soothe them and we're racking our brain to figure out what is it that's keeping them so alert or so revved up. Sometimes we figure it out and other times we don't. But at the very basic level, babies need that input from us to be able to co-regulate. And contact naps are probably one of the prime ways that that happens. As long as that happens in a safe environment where you know you will either not be falling asleep or you've created a safe shared sleep space for your baby, following the guidelines of safe sleep, then, provide those cuddles, provide those contact naps, and only change it when it's truly a problem for you. Not a problem because anyone else has told you, but because it's actually a problem for you. If from your sensory perspective, you're touched out and irritable and not getting enough sleep, it may be time to explore some other options that meet both of your needs. But until then, you don't need to change it if it's not broken. It's actually providing your baby with the sensory input they need. Okay, so in looking next, it can be worthwhile, especially in the context of knowing that your baby is going to have a very unique profile, different from everybody else's, to look at it as a period of discovery for you in figuring out what is it that soothes your baby and what is it that revs them up. There are some babies, like I said, that are seeking input. These are often babies that when they're toddlers, they actually need some horseplay or roughhousing at bedtime to calm their nervous system down. And that's where often if it's two-parent family and you have someone who loves the roughhousing, often that's dad, to have that be part of their role at bedtime for those kids that are seeking that. We also know that seeking that is part of the human experience and that during the day, the sensory input that they get is really important. So let's talk about some of the ways to use the sensory nervous system to calm. I've talked a bit about joint compression. It's a lot of heavy work. So that's where the hugs feel so calming. Joint compression, where you're actually just making sure, for a young baby that you're giving some pressure through deep massage or through movement through the joints that can help. With toddlers, that'll look like a lot of running around and horseplay. But also, I always love promoting heavy work for toddlers. They seem to love to pick up heavy things. They want to drag them across the floor. They want to help. Toddlers are really big on helping. So they want to move heavy things, push heavy things, or pushing chairs over to the counter to climb on it. And all of those things are giving that proprioceptive input to calm their nervous systems and to give them a really good sense of where they are in space. And so that will change as a baby grows older. It'll look very different. But even toddlers love to be rocked and swayed and carried on backs. So deep pressure can be massage. Rocking side to side, I've talked about, it's very calming for the nervous system. Another thing, and we can brainstorm a little bit within the group, ways to help our children do this. But one of the gatekeepers of a calm nervous system and of feeling safe is the vagus nerve. And there's a polyvagal theory that Stephen Porges has developed that really looks at how to create safety so that that vagus nerve is working optimally. It feeds the digestive tract, it feeds speech and phonetics, it feeds social interaction and engagement. So that smile, that connection, that eye contact is all through, or at least supported by the vagus nerve. And so things like gargling, singing, and humming all help support a healthy state for that nerve. That nerve can either be in kind of fight, flight, or freeze, or it can be optimal and calm. And I want to bring up two concepts here around the vagus nerve. And the first is, obviously your baby is unlikely to be gargling or singing or humming, but you can. And if you're feeling anxious, gargling may help calm you down, but singing and humming certainly can, and you can do that anywhere. The other thing that is useful to know is that we have what are called mirror neurons. These are like a reflection of the other person's nervous system. So when you take care of yourself through things that calm you down, so singing or humming, talking to a friend on the phone, going for a walk in the sunshine, cuddling up with a cup of tea, your nervous system is calmer, and that will be reflected in the mirror neurons of your infant, which is quite powerful to know. So if you're feeling like you haven't developed a good relationship with self-care, know that the self-care that you were doing for you to keep your nervous system feeling good is actually going to support your baby too, which is kind of a good bonus if you're struggling with self-care. I wanted to ask though, because I'm curious, especially for those little ones who may be making some more cooing sounds and noises. Do any of you have little ones who growl or groan or make noises with their vocal cords as they're falling asleep? And I'll pause because that might take a bit, especially for those of you with a babe in one arm or two arms you're trying to text in. Have you ever had noticed that your baby makes noise when they're falling asleep? No, but clicking noises and cooing. I'm going to flip over to the chat again. Clicking noises when falling asleep, like with their tongue, and then cooing. Lovely. What you may find, I didn't ask anyone's ages today, so they may be small. You may find now that I've talked about it, that it may start happening, clicking with the tongue. Well, it may not be the vagus nerve or that the vibration of the vocal cords, but certainly, the sound, the pleasure from the sound and the feeling of that tongue can be very soothing too. Again, it's all about looking at it through that lens of sensory input and sensory processing, right? It changes everything when you start looking at it through that lens. I wanted to talk too. Now, does anyone have toddlers in the group? If not, I'll keep this part to a minimum because I do want to open it up to questions and a chance to connect too, since that's still not an easy thing at this stage of things right now. Oh, good, a toddler, 3.5 years old. All right, we got an old toddler in the group. Yay, that's always fun. And the reason is I want to talk about sensory bins because although younger babies, it's going to be a while. We hear a lot about, or perhaps you have, I feel like it's up on, I don't know, every 5th Instagram post that I see around sensory bins. When we look at how to create a daytime experience to fill the sensory needs, with babies, it tends to be that proximity, right? Gordon Neufeld's senses root of attachment. So it's a lot of touch, a lot of being close to you. By toddlerhood, they're moving away from us quite a bit, right? And so they're getting more independent. They're circling back when they need a top up of security. But one of the important things, and 2.5, don't worry about not being able to answer. I know most of you have one hand at least full and busy today. So if you can't answer, that's okay. So with toddlers, they're moving away from us. They're more independent, and yet their sensory needs are still super high. And in fact, in some ways higher than in infancy, because they're now having to use their own bodies to meet those needs through walking, climbing, running, rolling, horseplay. And so filling up their day with enough sensory experiences that their sensory cup is full can be a challenge. And one of the fun ways, if you're not averse to mess, is to create sensory bins with dry pasta or rice or other safe objects for them, making a treasure hunt with trying to find toys in the rice. Having a variety of textures like shaving cream on the wall of the shower, or different brushes and materials inside a box that they can be moving around and touching and feeling it for that sensory piece. So sensory bins are fun, but it's certainly not the only way to give toddlers that input. Again, I think giving them lots of an opportunity to climb, push, pull, lift, carry, knock over, all of those big muscle things that give them all that proprioception is really, really valuable. And that also means taking risks, right? Toddlers need to take some risk with their abilities, challenge that vestibular system, their balance, challenge their proprioception. Where are they in space? But I want to finish off before we open up to questions, just to talk again about how important feelings of safety are for the nervous system. We develop our sensory processing, that understanding, collecting, and gathering all those senses to decide how we respond through practice and experience. And we don't get that practice and experience if we're scared. So finding ways that are within or just beyond the limits of our kiddos in terms of sensory experiences or experiences in general is helpful, because it gives them the practice without pushing them too far beyond their ability. I want to give two examples. One came through in one of your questions. I don't think she's here today. It was another sleep coach that was going to be on today. Falling out of bed in toddlerhood, spatial awareness, understanding where your body is in the bed so you don't fall out. Again, it comes back down to processing and experiential. The more experience we have in understanding where our bodies are in space, the faster we're going to be able, or our kids are going to be able to learn where they are in space and how to navigate that. You can imagine, picturing a toddler who doesn't know where the edge of the bed is and falling out often. And parents not resting very well because they're worried about a toddler falling out of the bed, versus a basketball player who can dribble a ball and run at the same time that he's looking around to see where the other players are, and then effortlessly, while still, leaping into the air and getting the basket in. I'm not good at basketball, so if my if my imitation of dribbling is pitiful, or looks pitiful, it's because it is. And I own that. I'm not a basketball player. So you can imagine just how much growth and development and change in the brain happens to go from not even understanding where the edge of the bed is to being able to dribble and get a 2-point. I do know 2 points. I know a little bit. And that growth is through experience. And so there are ways to help children develop that sense. Early on, like in the first year and beyond, it is you are co-regulating, and you are providing that input and discovering what their sensory personality is like. In toddlerhood, it's about risk taking and opportunity, pulling the cushions off the couch and letting them navigate how to climb up on it, having those tumbles so that they know just how far outside of their base of support they can lean before they fall over. If any of you have new sitters, those that are just learning how to sit, maybe 6 months with your hands and then beyond, you're going to know that they just don't have that sense yet. And yet they develop it so quickly through experience and brain development. And the very last thing I'll talk about is just to leave you with this idea of how to support sleep at bedtime through sensory-based sleep associations. This really pulls in everything that we've talked about today, but applies it specifically to your bedtime routine. Now, I use the idea of layering sensory sleep associations Lindsay Hookway, who is a sleep coach trainer, like she has a whole program from out of the UK, talks about habit stacking. And I'm actually liking her phrase better. I think it describes it better. I look at it as being like the mattresses in Princess and the Pea, where when you look at the sensory or the associations for sleep that your baby is expecting, whether it's the routine of reading a book or a lullaby, or brushing their teeth, or rocking them and nursing them, or bed sharing, your baby begins to understand that there is a routine and a rhythm, and that if you provide that consistently, they're expecting it. And then you get to a point where you want to change something in it. You are exhausted and need to hand over responsibility to your spouse, or you want to night wean, or you want to transition that falling asleep in your arms to falling asleep in the crib. And by looking at layering sensory sleep associations or habit stacking, you're looking at what other sensory experiences can you pull into the bedtime routine and establish over 3 or 4 consistent weeks of using them, so that they become just as integral to the nighttime routine or bedtime routine as all the other associations you already have in place, some of which you may not have even paid attention to. You can really break down just how much of your natural family rhythm in the house in the evening is all part of preparing for sleep. Once you've added in other things, whether it is a lullaby, or whether it's a sip from a sippy cup, or whether it's nursing, whether it's a book, whether it's horseplay or deep pressure or infant massage, once you've layered that on for a few weeks and it becomes integral, then any association that has become unsustainable, for example, a 2.5-year-old in your arms to fall asleep, may be unsustainable because they are getting so big and you just can't do it anymore. You'll have all these other mattresses stacked up, so that your baby will not be like the Princess and the Pea. You'll be able to take out the bottom mattress, figuratively, the association that is not sustainable, and all those other stacked associations will take the place. And because your baby or toddler will be used to, over a course of, I'd say 4 weeks, I generally recommend, then you'll be able to remove that association that's not sustainable and be able to move forward. That is the last thing I'll say to that. I will close up, but I did promise to add a particular bonus for those who are in the 0 to 6 month range today. All of you, by default, by accident, are on my email list. That wasn't intended. I'm not a technological person when it comes to email lists and tags. If you only want the replay, just hang on for the replay email and then you can come off the list. If you want to stay on, you're going to be getting emails about an upcoming program that I have coming up at the end of April for 0 to 6 month olds. It's my infant development circle for parents, and it explores sleep, sensory development, gross motor activities, fine motor, communication, cognitive development, play, and parenting, all in a 6-week series that allows parents to connect with each other, share ideas and stories and support, but also get evidence-based information about supporting development for the 0 to 6 month. I do have a 6 to 12 month group that I will also run later, and I'm currently running a toddler group that just started a couple of weeks ago. But for those that are in the 0 to 6 range, or will be at the end of April, if you want to sign up, you can get on the email list now to get an invitation to my infant development mini class. And if you do end up signing up, you would get my early bird rate and a half-hour one-on-one consult by phone or video. And that's as my thank you for signing up early, so that I can have enough people to make it a go, so that I'm not waiting for enrollment. So if you're interested in that, email me, or I will, when I send out the replay, send out the link for signing up for that. I want to thank you for coming. It's always a pleasure to get to share this. It's also always a struggle to know how much information. We talk about sensory bombardment. Have I bombarded you with too much information, or was it somewhere close to the sweet spot for you in terms of the amount of information you're getting? I welcome any and all feedback. You can email me once you get the replay, or drop a comment in the chat. either to the whole group or to me individually. But I'll also add that we have a few minutes left. I welcome your questions. If there's something that I needed to elaborate on, oh, thank you. Perfect amount of information for you. Great. And we're all different. So some may feel overwhelmed, some may be underwhelmed. Hopefully most of you are somewhere in the middle where it's just the right amount. I love giving these free workshops. Because I love connecting with parents who are either just getting to know me and you don't know whether you want to work with me one-on-one or join a group, but also for those of you who don't want to work with me or don't have the means to work with me, I still get to share what I think is really valuable information. And if it supports you in your parenting role, then I am really, really happy with that. Yeah, the metaphor of the mattress is, yeah, it's fun. I always have to preface it with, we're trying not to have princesses on, noticing that pee in the bottom. So the more mattresses we can figuratively stack up, the better. Yeah, so again, I welcome any of your feedback. Once the meeting is over, the chat will be closed, but you are more than welcome to reach out by email. And if you want to be sure that you're on the list, actually, I think the sign up is on my website at heatherboyd.ca/free-workshops. There's a coming in April infant development workshop sign up. And if you sign up there, you will get the early bird if you do end up, or you'll at least get the information to come to the next workshop in April. I'm getting a question about how soon to build a routine. Yes, because I think that came up when one of you signed up. How to build a routine with a 1-month-old. My view is that in the early months, the key to developing a positive routine is to follow the lead of your baby. So let them guide you around the patterns that they have for wakefulness and for tiredness, for wake windows, and for when an appropriate bedtime is. 1-month-old is still so very new in the world. They're just now navigating sensory information and processing. So regulation, proximity, rocking, any of those sensory strategies you can use to help them keep a calm nervous system means they'll be able to learn it better. We can't learn when our nervous systems are stressed out. Learning just shuts down. And if any of you have test phobia, you'll know what I mean. You could know everything out of the textbook. And if you are afraid of tests or nervous with tests, it doesn't matter. You can't communicate what you know. You can't take in new information. So very much go with the rhythm of your baby at that age and just collect information, understand them better so that by the time they are 5 or 6 months old, you'll understand and see some of the patterns. And then those are the basis of your routine, is what patterns they're showing you. Question about cortisol levels and bedtime. When is a good bedtime for 0 to 6 month olds? Again, I think especially for babies under 6 months, it's about following their pattern. Cortisol levels, I haven't seen a study that shows it spikes after 8. I think if you have that study, I would love you to share it with me. The data I've seen, the cortisol levels drop, except when babies are overtired and stressed, but usually it's more around stress than overtired. It really is about, the 0 to 6, their systems are just now developing circadian rhythm. There's cortisol levels generally would drop when they feel comfort and safe, and they would increase in the morning to get them awake and up and at them, just like our cortisol levels go up in the morning as well. Melatonin is not detectable in the first few months. The only melatonin a baby gets in the first few months is from breast milk. And then they start developing it at around 4 months, and it becomes measurable, detectable a little bit after that to help with sleep as well. Basically, what I look at when I'm talking about cortisol and melatonin is there are 2 main pieces. I should read the rest of your comment too. The best time for the baby, sleeps younger with more naps, then goes down at 9. Babies are so, in the experience that I have with families, babies vary. And when we start looking at the clock as our guide, anytime before a year, as our main guide, we're not paying enough attention to the natural rhythm of our babies. We have circadian rhythm, which is cortisol and melatonin. It goes by the sun and darkness. And then we have sleep pressure, how long we've been awake. Now, as adults, our sleep pressure doesn't build until the evening. We stay awake most of the day, except for the first 3 years of parenthood, or the first 3 years until your child is well past the toddler age. You may need naps, but generally, adults can get through the day without napping. Even though there are studies that say naps actually increase our productivity. We don't have life that's designed very well for that right now. So take the naps when you can. But basically, sleep pressure for a baby is in short spurts, right? That sleep pressure builds so that they have a nap during the day, and then it relieves the pressure, and then it builds again. Then they have the next nap, and it builds again, and you're having the next nap, and it builds again, and then it's bedtime. And that aligns with circadian rhythm. So that last building of sleep pressure hopefully aligns with their circadian rhythm to create good conditions for being able to fall asleep fairly easily. Fairly easily. There are lots of periods of time where it's not easy at all. So to say that there is a good time for a baby to go to bed and to be trying to schedule a baby to fit in with that is a recipe for frustration and resentment and long hours in the nursery trying to make it work when it's not the right time for baby. So I think if you are following your baby's cues and they are content and they're engaged and they're smiling and they're growing and they're developing, and it's a routine that is working well enough for you, maybe not perfect. Maybe you would love them to go to bed at 7 so you have time to yourself. But the trade-off is that you're trying to fit a baby into your schedule instead of navigating everyone's needs equally. So I would say carry on doing what you're doing if it's working. My view is don't change it if it isn't broken. I see we've reached the full hour, so I will say goodbye, but I will say reach out if you have any questions. It will guide me in the next free workshop that I'm offering on the fourth Monday of the week. You're welcome. It is a big pleasure to do this. If you are looking for more, my Facebook group, I do a Q&A once a month on there as well. It's a bit less interactive, but you are welcome to join. Again, if you go to free-workshops on my website, I think I have the Q&A listed there. Setting. So all the best. Enjoy the rest of the day. Get out in the sunshine. Enjoy the warmth, and we may meet up again. Take care. Bye for now.